Would your worldview be shaken if extraterrestrial life was disclosed en masse to the public? Welcome into episode 8 of the Negative Space Podcast. I am not a federal agent, and today we are talking about the big tinfoil hat topic, aliens. Frequent listeners know that I've already discussed the concept of ancient aliens and how Zecharia Sitchin was a total doofus who knew absolutely nothing. He had no clue what he was talking about. The man claimed to be an ancient languages scholar, but couldn't even read Hebrew. Like, there's no evidence to support that at all. I talked about that on a previous episode on biblical conspiracy theories that drive me nuts. Today is something a little different, though. We are going to be talking about, I guess, more modern aliens, not ancient aliens, and sort of our government, the United States government's involvement with alleged alien life. So that's going to go into things like predictive programming, government cover-ups, World War II, mainstream media, and of course, the deep state. I was actually inspired of this. Speaking of Zecharia Sitchin and ancient aliens, I was really kind of had the fire lit under my butt to do this when I saw Tucker Carlson went on the Joe Rogan podcast and completely abused Ezekiel to say that his vision was of UFOs. And I know I discussed that on the biblical conspiracy theory episode, and oh my gosh, can we please stop that? Can we please stop saying that? Just the complete lie, the complete fabrication of that vision was of aliens. It makes no sense in any context. In any context, that would be what he is seeing. No, he's writing the captive Israelites in Babylon. The entire thing, I'm repeating myself. If you want to hear me talk about that more, go listen to that episode. It's actually way cooler than Ezekiel seeing aliens, and it's way more meaningful than just a random vision of aliens in the middle of the Bible that Ezekiel decided would be important to include in a letter to captive Israelites in Babylon. Like, who cares about that? Who would care? If you were one of those captive Israelites, would you care if you got a letter from a prophet that just said, look at this. Man, I saw some aliens. That's a UFO. No, you wouldn't. So why would he include? Go listen to that if you want to hear me rant about that more. Because that's just so stupid. It is just really stupid. I'm sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be saying that because I know there are a lot of people that believe that. But if you think that vision is of aliens, no, I'm sorry. You're just wrong. You're just wrong. Please actually read the entire book of Ezekiel if you think it's aliens. You'll find yourself disproven pretty quickly. But anyway, it's been a minute since I've actually recorded an episode, and that is because I've been sick. I've been very under the weather. I shouldn't say very under the weather, but I was pretty under the weather, and I already sound bad enough as I'm recording but so I wasn't going to record while I was sick, but none of you guys are here for my high production quality. You're here either because you know me personally, or you're actually interested in some of the things that I have to say. Sometimes both. And if you're both, shout out you. Sweet. Oh boy. Yeah, so I'm probably going to be a little rusty as I go about this. This is actually my 4th time recording this because the first 3 times were just stale and I was boring and tripping over my own words more than I normally do because you know what? That's just a part of who I am when I'm recording this. I trip over my own words. You get pretty dang close to the real me in this recording. I will say that. I don't have any sort of, I'll play up things I'm excited or curious about on this just for entertainment value, but it's still pretty dang close to who I am in person. But anyways, as you know, I warm up with a nice little 10-minute or so rant on whatever I feel like. Last time it was something I just didn't have written down. It was a total audible. This time I'm going to stick with what I have written down. Even though I realize this is, I mean, I'm not super as into it as I was when I wrote it, but you know what? Roll with the punches, man. Keep going. And I still hold this opinion, as curmudgeonly and as elderly as it makes me sound, but I am perpetually annoyed by the physical buzz of phone notifications. Now, anybody who has texted me for an extended period of time knows that I am horrible. I'm really bad at responding to a lot of texts outside of like work hours, and that is because I have notifications for every app besides like iMessage or my phone turned off. I mean like Gmail too, but like that is how much I just cannot stand the physical buzz. Just like it always comes along at the worst possible time when I'm trying to focus on something and just ends up distracting me. You know, like I know, you can turn on do not disturb or whatever, but even then, like I get to a point when I have those things turned off and it's just buzzing in my pocket and it annoys the living daylights out of me. Oh my goodness. So that naturally makes it's never about the content of the actual notification itself. It's about the physical buzz. Like I feel like I'm being programmed, like it's trying to program me, you know? If any of you have done like a prolonged screen time detox, you could say, and you just walk around without your phone, your brain will create that phantom buzz in your pocket area because it likes that buzz because it means, oh, I can release dopamine because I get to look at this funny little colored square rectangle. Square rectangle, that sounded stupid. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. So that is why I have all of those things turned off. You know, Instagram, no way. Most of the time, notifications I would get from Instagram are like, so-and-so, you know, uploaded their story for the first time in a while. Check it out now. I don't care. Don't show me that. Stop. Or like Twitter notifications are the most annoying, I will say. That's why I've had those turned off since before I ever went on this tirade against being notified about things. If you need to urgently get to me, the only way you're going to do that is through iMessages or phone, or the phone actually calling me. Because otherwise it would literally be faster if I handwrit a letter, put it in the mail, got postage, and sent it off than if I was just looking at my phone. That's another thing, is I think I've programmed myself pretty well, speaking of programming myself, to just forget that my phone exists for long periods of time. And that is really a beautiful thing, I have to say. It's nice to just forget, you know, that I've got this little thing that I should be carrying around everywhere in case of emergency or, you know, anything stupid like that. Good grief. It kind of ties into a larger subject, though. I think I talked about both of these at the back end of the last podcast, is that we give each other too much instant access to one another. Like 20 years ago, the amount of access that we have to one another just by sending a message from anywhere in the world, any person, I think, would look at that as insane. Like, I know there was text messaging and phone calls and whatever back then, but even then, I feel like it's progressed to such a point that it would just seem so advanced to the average person of 20 years ago. Definitely 30 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago. So that is a whole separate issue. That, you know what, why not? I'll ramble on that a little bit too. I think it is genuinely causing us to be sick of each other, you know, more and more. Like, but before, let's say you are in a romantic relationship, you know, 30 years ago. You saw each other in person, you went out on a date or whatever, and then you went home. And then maybe you called. But other than that, you had time to sit with thinking about, whomever else. And, separation makes art grow fonder. That whole sort of thing. And, same thing applies to friendship and whatever. It makes the time that you actually physically have together that much more special. And when we have the instant access to one another that some people, myself included for a period of time, just gave away completely free. Like without any sort of thought about how it drained myself, or what it was even doing to my brain, because eventually your dopamine receptors get fried out, and it gets harder for your brain to produce those, and so you feel actually physically happy less often, and that creates all sorts of depression issues and whatnot. And I could go into like big tech, is trying to make us miserable and dependent on them, whatever. But I think overall you probably get the gist of what I'm saying. It's almost gotten to a point where if you're not like me and you don't just instantly turn off every app trying to notify you of anything ever, you almost have to artificially manufacture that separation. And that's probably an unpopular opinion. And obviously, like, I know there's nuance to everything, so I'm not speaking in absolute terms, and you shouldn't take this in absolute terms. But seriously, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that contributed to like higher divorce rates. Like, I think it makes it a lot easier to become quickly infatuated with someone, having that instant access, and then not letting that emotion, spread out over time. And it just becomes almost manipulative in some senses then too. It's really, 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 really actually insane. And I think if we don't, as a collective, decide that is an issue, I don't think we're ever going to be able to look back on this instant access that we give to everyone and be able to see it for what it is. We all need to do a better job at protecting our mind, our identity, our own peace, our own social battery. Like, we give that away for free all the time. And I say this as a complete hypocrite, saying that we should, be stopping it, whatever. I'm more than well aware of that. But those are just some old man thoughts that I had to get out of my system and kind of get warmed up on before we talk about the concept. Not the concept, that sounds stupid. See, another reason why you get close to the real me as you can get without me being there in person. I do not cut anything. If I say something stupid, it's in the podcast, baby. And that probably lowers a lot of people's impression of me. The 6 people that listen to this. But, oh well, who cares? I don't know. I'm having fun. I don't necessarily want this to get big. I've been seeing all these YouTubers kind of along the same lines of what I was just talking about. I've been seeing all these YouTubers that I really like and have really respected. They're just backing away. They're taking a break, or if not retiring outright, because their audiences, only allow them to talk about so much. And that is really draining. I look at Finn McKenty, man. Love Finn McKenty. His channel has had a really big impact on my music taste and how I think creatively, and all those sorts of things, and just the nasty things that people say about him for absolutely no reason are completely unwarranted, just because some people don't like some of his opinions. But from all accounts, he's just a perfectly normal guy who just makes videos about music and the music industry that he's been involved in, forever. So he knows what he's talking about. I think some of his content just hits a little too close to home for some of these people, because he's kind of the king of stereotyping music fans, and that's pretty awesome. But if you're interested in his videos, he's got one channel called just his name, Finn McKenty, and then he's got the Punk Rock MBA. That's a pretty good channel too. But anyway, I'm done talking about that. We are talking about aliens, and specifically because the concept of aliens is too broad to talk about. We're going to talk about the United States alleged involvement with extraterrestrials. Now, why do I say alleged? Well, I'm going to be honest. Some of you guys are not going to like this opinion. You're going to like the idea that we've been hiding alien bodies a lot better than what I'm about to say. What I'm about to say for the next hour and a half or so. And that is, the government is using the myth of hidden alien contact. They're keeping it alive to set the country, or possibly even the world at large, for a simulated cosmic event that will lead to absolute control in the name of safety. Okay, maybe that's a little extreme, a little over the top, but it's really possible, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. Now, when I say any of this, it's not like ufologists or people who really believe that aliens are out there. It's not like they don't know any of this information either. In fact, a lot of where I got some of this information is from these sorts of people. We just come to different conclusions for different reasons, I think. I am personally not against the idea of genuine extraterrestrial life out there. I'm not. I don't see any reason not to believe that, but I also don't see any reason to absolutely, without a doubt, beyond a shadow of a doubt, think that there is. Both options are on the table for me. I'm skeptical of everything, but willing to believe anything, and it is not going to change my worldview at all. It's just not. It's not going to change any of my theological or philosophical opinions. It's not. In fact, it might be an alien existence might be able to fit quite nicely into some of those things. But let's get into some of the funky history. All right. So let's go back to World War II. Now, if you remember the last episode on MKUltra, this is kind of the same time that some of these funky MKUltra mind control experiments were taking place. But specifically the end, after that totally real Adolf Hitler was found dead in that Nazi bunker. I mean, totally, definitely him. The photos in the FBI documents that are available online, if you know where to look, that definitely looks like him. That absolutely has to be him. I don't know why I'm hanging on this point for so long, because that is definitely him. That's definitely him. He definitely Epsteined himself in a bunker. Yep, that totally happened. After that happened, a bunch of people in the military were like, wow, there are a bunch of great scientists from these different countries, from Nazi Germany and Japan. We could use them for our purposes. Now, President Truman didn't like that idea one bit. Rightfully so. So naturally, good sense was completely ignored, and that's how we get Operation Paperclip, baby. Now, this was originally called Operation Overcast, and Paperclip was a plan to bring these Axis scientists in, interview them, create a file on them, and then the ones that the military liked would have a paperclip placed on their file, and that it'd be the little they'd put it on the you know what I mean. This would set said file apart as it goes down the line, and this is where the lying would commence. These Nazi and Japanese scientists would be given a squeaky clean background, squeaky clean history. Everything's great, sunshine and rainbows, if they were deemed interesting enough in the vetting process. Basically, witness protection, but for, leading engineers that could make rockets, that sort of thing. Nazi nerds, perhaps. A famous example of one of these Operation Paperclip benefactors was Werner von Braun. He was a Nazi who became the number 2 at NASA and was heavily involved in the creation of Disney's World of Tomorrow. So, sorry, Disney adults, you're going to hate that, but some of your favorite things were literally invented by a Nazi. I know, I'm sure a lot of them already hate Walt Disney as it is, but whatever. And as a Nazi scientist, von Braun developed the V2 rocket, and that would help us develop the Saturn V rocket, which was crucial for winning the space race. But we will get to von Braun again a little bit later. So it's not like this technological inclination of a lot of these people was all bad, but you're going to start to see why this was really, really, really murky, and it just would have been better if we had never done this in the first place. In total, though, we had something like 700 Nazi scientists and 1,600 total foreign scientists who ended up coming into the United States to work for our military after World War II. Now, if you remember, again, from the MKUltra episode, I noted how the government explicitly violated the Nuremberg Code, which was developed after the discovery of the Nazi death camps. So you can see how this all quite nicely ties together. During the war, one of the sites that we tested atomic weapons on was New Mexico. If you've seen Oppenheimer, then you know a lot about New Mexico's significance, or at least its significance during the war, because New Mexico was also a testing site long after World War II, and this is where we get into the first oopsie-daisy of Operation Paperclip. Back in 1947, so that is 2 years after World War II, an unidentified aircraft crashed over Roswell, New Mexico, and a body was found along with the craft. Now, this turned, as you can imagine, into a media frenzy. People were freaking out and thought the creature, was a gray, and the craft was alien in nature. If you don't know what I mean by gray, it's just kind of a colloquial slang term for like the little gray alien dudes, if you've seen like Howard the Alien, I think, look him up if you don't know, that's a gray. This would lead to the release of the Roswell report, which stated that the incident wasn't alien in nature at all. In fact, it was rather a high-altitude balloon carrying low-frequency sound sensors to send Soviet atomic bomb tests that also carried crash test dummies, or so the report claimed. This was allegedly a part of Project Mogul. Now, I do believe that there were actual high-altitude balloons being tested here. Those were absolutely in play. That just makes a lot of sense. If you remember, there's also Japanese scientists a part of Paperclip, and the Japanese scientists had extensive tests of their own that they did during the war. Jeez. One of them was Operation 731 and the horrors that went on there. This was all about testing bioweapons on humans to see the results. So originally it was called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwangtung Army, which that's definitely not what it was. It was founded by Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, and he would test on war prisoners from Korea, China, Russia, and other surrounding countries. These individuals would be referred to as logs and tortured by means of, say, vivisection without any anesthesia, amputations, and being intentionally affected with diseases such as plague and anthrax. Despite these horrors, many of these scientists, including Ishii, benefited from Operation Paperclip. Again, you can see how MKUltra ties in quite nicely to all of this. But that's kind of a side point here. They also worked on, wait for it, high-altitude balloons. They even combined the two and sent balloons filled with anthrax that landed here in the United States, but the press was forbidden from talking about it since they didn't want the Japanese government to know that they actually made it here. But naturally, the U.S. decided that these two things would be cool to mess with. but we'll take it even a step further. With the combined forces of the Japanese balloons, Nazi aircraft, and the U.S.'s brazen disregard for worldwide ethical standards, we get Project Sunshine. Like MKUltra, it's tested a myriad of different things on death row inmates specifically, generally people who fit a certain height and weight profile. And one of them was altitude testing. Meaning we sent these people up in these balloons to see how high they could go before dying. But not only death row inmates, some of you have heard me say this in person before, but we also tested on children with progeria. Now, progeria is an awful terminal illness that makes the victim look like they are aging very quickly. It comes with, wrinkled skin, hair loss, joint problems. Basically everything that happens as you get old, just at a very, very, very young age. And most people die of heart attacks or strokes, but some of them die from altitude testing at the hands of a horribly corrupt government with no concern for human life. All right, and we're back. Sorry, I had to take a second there. I am no longer really sick, but ever since I was a young chap and had some pretty bad pneumonia, respiratory illnesses kind of linger with me a little bit, so I had to get up and get something to drink so I didn't have a coughing fit. I got my Synergy Raw Kombucha, gingerberry with 9 billion living probiotics. Isn't that cool? I actually want to be able to make my own kombucha. I just don't know how. I'm looking at this mead making kit, which is obviously making mead, which is all about fermentation. So I want to see if you can make kombucha out of that instead of, wine from honey. But anyway, let's continue on about the horrors, the atrocities committed by our own federal government. Take a look at a picture of a child with progeria, will ya? Pull up Google, whatever. Google child with progeria. I don't know. That's kind of out of pocket, whatever. The enlarged cranium and pale skin of said child with progeria. Doesn't it look a little bit like a gray? The stereotypical alien looking dude? I'm surely I'm not the only one who's seeing that. And I know I'm not, because we tested on them, and that's how we got what the grays look like. Now, the Roswell incident was just a paperclip experiment gone completely wrong. A balloon had popped, a body crashed, and many thought it to be extraterrestrial in nature. You might say, but wait, didn't you say that the official report said itself that it was a weather balloon? Yes, I did. But that didn't stop speculation from going awry, and the military used that to their advantage. Now, dismissing this as alien in nature provides a natural cover-up for the real crimes committed here. It takes away the horrors of the known reality and replaces it with the mystery that the Air Force themselves have perpetuated. It got even stranger with the release of the Majestic 12 documents, also simply known as the MJ-12. Also, I realize I just said something about the mystery that the Air Force themselves perpetuated. I promise I'm not leaving you on a cliffhanger there. We will get to that. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. But first, I really want to talk about the Majestic 12 documents. So, the MJ-12 were a series of documents that were allegedly written by members of the Majestic 12 group, a collection of individuals above the top secret level of government clearance, writing to each other on the topic of alien knowledge held by the U.S. government. These documents were not Freedom of Information Act pages, however. They were leaked, and in an awfully dubious way. As the official story goes, a special classified presidential order in 1947 under Truman created Operation Majestic 12 after multiple alleged reports of UFO sightings that were believed to be alien. Guess where a lot of these UFOs were recovered? I'll just let you sit with that question for a second. Jeopardy music. Let it play in your head. I'll give you, 3, 2, 1. That's right, you got it. Good job. New Mexico. Surely that isn't coincidence. Other crashes and sightings both generally take place on other parts of the West Coast, such as Los Angeles and up in the Pacific Northwest, which is going to become relevant in a moment as well. But most of them were in like government testing sites. The MJ-12 document stated that the interplanetary agency of the government had recovered different craft and body parts of extraterrestrials and then decided to hide that evidence from the public. Now, how they surfaced to the public is a fascinating story as well. This is what actually happened. That was the cover story. This is the Pink Panther plot of what we call reality, and it's insane, and I love it, but also hate it. In 1984, a well-known ufologist and film producer, Jamie Shandera, woke up one morning to find in his mail an envelope containing 8 pages of the MJ-12 documents that supposedly were papers with briefing information on Operation Majestic 12. They detailed a crash that the group of 12, hence the name Majestic 12, they were investigating, as well as the names of the members. It also outlined recovered materials from the crash, how it was hidden from the public, and the goal of exploiting said technology for our own gain. Oh, wait a second. You know where the crash, where that crash happened that they were investigating? Guess specifically where it took place. I'll give you another, 5 seconds to think about it. Jeopardy music in your head. All right, time's up. You got it. Roswell, New Mexico. Isn't that funky, huh? Now, Shandera and a colleague of his, William Moore, would be contacted a year later about further information on Operation Majestic 12 by an anonymous figure. Said anonymous figure introduced them to the Cutler Twining Memo, part of the MJ-12 documents that was allegedly found in the National Archives. Now, it's already fishy that some anonymous figure is reaching out to them about this information, but we press on. The postcards they received from the anonymous figure had a return address of Box 189, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and said that they were sent from New Zealand. Sounds like a bit of a troll, right? Someone yanking their chain. The contents of the documents contain cryptic messages like Reese's Pieces, which this happened several years after E.T. came out, which is, that I think would have really given it away. But whatever. And also referred to a place called Suitland. The assumption was that this was code that the duo was not meant to crack. Then a colleague of theirs... Sorry, excuse me, one moment. I just lost my place because I accidentally scrolled a little too far. All right, sorry, and we're back again. If there are a few weird cuts in this episode, it is because, I still got those freaking coffin fits coming up every now and again. Particularly in my little closet in Los Angeles with no airflow. And I need to keep the door closed, for, soundproofing and everything. But anyway, one of their colleagues who was involved with their research asked them to search for a document in the National Archives repository. That was seemingly coincidental. But they went, they went out to look, and guess where they ended up? A place called Suitland, Maryland. That's where the National Archives are. And guess the name of the head archivist, Ed Reese. Of course, it was all too easy. This code wasn't so secret after all. It was meant for them to figure out. What's even funnier about this is not that it's like, a Pink Panther plot or like a Austin Powers movie, but that the documents that they found in box 189 of the National Archives. It didn't have any formal archiving documentation or any numbers attached to the document. So most ufologists see this as a total sham and a planned event to leak misinformation into the mainstream. Now, I think that is partially true. Some people might think that this whole plot was cooked up by both Shandera and Moore. But I have bad news on that front, because the document that they found, this was not a picture of a document like the other MJ12 documents. Sorry. Excuse me. This was an actual onion skin paper document, like the government used in any other instance. Now, this was the Twining. No, wait. Sorry, I gotta. Cutler Twining memo. Jeez, I should have written that down. The Cutler Twining memo that they came across. And funny thing about that, Nathaniel Twining was proven to be out of the country at the time that this memo was dated, meaning that this was not only a government document, but an official government document that was forged. You really can't make this stuff up. MJ12 special operation documents were also leaked later, which was basically, protocols on how to handle, recover extraterrestrial bodies and craft. So, whatever. Richard Doty, he is another name to know in this whole era of ufology, we should say. He worked for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, the AFOSI, which is a painful acronym to try to say. I'm just going to call it the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. That is somehow easier. I don't know how. But he was a very well-known disinformation savant who worked very closely with several people, one of whom is the aforementioned William Moore. Now, he did this while undercover, I should note. William Moore later revealed that while he didn't exactly know what Doty was up to, he thought he was going to get insider information on extraterrestrials in exchange for personal information tied to his ufologist friends. Dang, he really sold out. That sucks so much. Now, another man named Paul Benowitz also received information from Doty, but poor Paul Benowitz, he eventually went insane. Like, he legitimately had to be institutionalized from the pure weight of the disinformation that Doty fed him constantly. And this happened all prior to the leaking of these documents, alleged leaking of these documents as well. Does that sound like some sort of MK Ultra experiment to anybody else? Like, I don't know. Mentally torturing someone until they go insane? I mean, the government has a pretty good track record of that, I should say. And the Air Force was heavily involved in all that as well. But anyway, FBI investigations into the MJ12 documents found them to be completely fraudulent because, well, of course they were. And that's kind of the last we heard of them. In fact, one of the pages says, "Let Dallas know the document is bogus and the case should be closed." That's a word we need to bring back more. Bogus. I need to start calling more things bogus. Now, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of my Synergy Raw Kombucha. I need to open... Oh, gosh, this bottle's so hard to open up on the fly. And I don't want to leave it open because, That's good. There are 9 billion living probiotics in this thing. Allegedly. Anyway, back to MJ12. Now, really, to boot, to disprove these documents, there was subsequent literary forensic tests that were completed on them by Dr. Carol Chasky and Dr. Michael Heiser. I've mentioned Dr. Heiser on this podcast before. He has been a huge inspiration to me, and a lot of his content is just absolutely phenomenal. If you're actually interested in more alien, stuff like shenanigans like this, you should check out his his 2 novels, The Facade and The Portent. The really cool thing about those is that not only it's science fiction, it's a novel, but every document that he includes or mentions in these novels is absolutely real. And in some cases, he provides copies of the document printed in the book. It's pretty cool, and it's well written. It's well portioned. You can not really breeze through it in a weekend, but like if you can finish them pretty quickly, and they're just really good books. But anyway, these forensic tests, these literary forensic tests, they don't look for specific jargon words to make sure they're being used correctly or anything like that, because any fool with internet access can figure out how to use any of those words. I mean, granted, internet access wasn't exactly what it was back then. They can look in a dictionary, I guess, but what they do is they test the unconscious writing habits of these writers and test them against official authentic documents that they know to be written by that person. It's really clever, and a really, really cool way of extracting information. And guess what? All but one page of the MJ-12 documents held up, and that page was innocuous at best. So they're just a complete, total sham, and I think most ufologists just completely consider them to be more disinformation. It's one of those things where they're still convinced that the government has access to said extraterrestrials, but thinks that this is sort of like a 4D chess move. And I suppose I could see it, but I think my view is a bit more straightforward here. Now, geez. In light of all these things, fast forward to 1997. So that was just in the 80s. This is a few years later, at the 50th anniversary of the Roswell incident. Now, there was a debriefing 50 years later for some reason held by a man named Colonel Haynes. A reporter in the audience, possibly a plant, possibly just a curious individual himself, asked a very valid question. He wanted Haynes to reconcile the idea that the Roswell report states that the recovered bodies, were crash test dummies. But the Air Force didn't start using crash test dummies until the 1950s. Remember, Roswell took place in 1947. They didn't start using these dummies until the 50s, which the same document itself admitted. So why the discrepancy? What's up with that? Now, Colonel Haynes, ever the rational man, as is anybody who receives a paycheck from the federal government, gives the answer that the Air Force believes witnesses underwent something called time compression. What? What are you talking about, bro? Time compression? He said he got up on a podium in front of the national media, in front of the world, and said that the Air Force believes that the witnesses living in 1947 were all collectively remembering the event in 1950. I'm just as dumbfounded as you are. And I've known about this for like 2 years at this point. How? What do you mean, dude? What does that mean? This makes less and less sense the more they talked about it. Seriously, who is supposed to believe this? Now that is exactly the point. Since Roswell, for one reason or another, the entire bit has been to convince the public that there has been secret alien disclosure that the government knows about but isn't telling us for one reason or another. Now think about when extraterrestrials really started to enter the mainstream. H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds really comes to mind first for me. That was after Roswell. It's a fantastic book, by the way. You should really read it. Now, that was possibly inspired by Roswell, or very cleverly disguised predictive programming. A more modern example of this is one that fellas like myself know all too much about, and that is Tom DeLonge. It's an easy insert for more of my crappy music opinions that you know you're gonna get. Tom, for those who don't know, Tom DeLonge, he became famous for being the co-vocalist in Blink-182, co-vocalist and guitarist in Blink-182, one of the biggest bands really of like the past 50 years or so, like massive. If you haven't heard of Blink-182, then you're just living under a rock. But they're pioneers of one of my favorite genres of music, pop punk. As Mark Hoppus, the other vocalist, said, Green Day invented it, but Blink-182 perfected it, and I'm not exactly sure I would agree with that, but Blink is streets ahead. I'll say that. Streets ahead at Green Day, in my opinion. Really, MXPX is better because they actually have, you know, some, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Some substance to their lyrics and songwriting, a little more than Blink. Whatever. They actually collabed together on a song that was in the soundtrack for Passion of the Christ, believe it or not. It's pretty good, actually, but I found that out a few months ago, and that really shocked me. Like, what is MXPX and Blink-182? What are they doing in a soundtrack for Passion of the Christ? I suppose POD was also on that. No shade at POD. Pioneers of new metal, but you know, I was more of a 1,000-foot crutch kid growing up myself. Anyway, I told you, I'm rambling, I'm getting lost. But anyway, Tom DeLonge had and still does have a passion for extraterrestrial exploration. And in 2015, he left Blink to do, you know, such shenanigans. He went out and looked around. He founded his academy called To the Stars, and then released his own music in a project called Angels and Airwaves. And you've probably heard at least Rebel Girl. That song blew up. You know, it's more of like a contemporary pop rock sound. I mean, I still like it. But he also had a classic with Blink-182 called Aliens Exist. Now, if you listen to the lyric or you read the lyrics of that song, you kind of see where he's coming from. You know, he's just always been interested in these sort of things. So you can understand how he gets in the position that he is in now, where he just kind of walked into the Pentagon and told them that he wanted to know what they had to share on the topic of aliens. And as any caricature of a conspiracy theorist, the government saw him as useful. So now he is releasing his own book that he's authored on aliens, and it's a novel, and I consider it to be predictive programming. Like, I'm not going to read it because I know that's what it's going to be. Or maybe I will read it and just come on here and point out all the things that I think are problems with it. Of course, I could be totally in the wrong with all of this. Like, who knows? And that's what makes this topic so interesting to so many people. But naturally, I drift towards a more contrarian view than the mainstream one. But whatever. Whew, now you might say, well, if the government is behind a lot of this, then how do you explain UFO sightings and how they move across the sky? And is that shirt new? It looks great on you. And I would say, well, first of all, as a matter of fact, yes, it is. Thank you very much. I got it on sale. And second, I would say, I can explain the whole UFO thing. Now, through Paperclip, we recovered a bunch of different documents pertaining to different aircraft that the Nazi engineers were working on. From what I can gather, what I remember, it might have included nuclear-powered aircraft that had some fancy reactor. I guess no need for reactors. So that is stuff I don't even want to get into. I'm not even close to qualified to talking about any of that. But also, they had a lot of wingless Delta-shaped aircraft, and there are still photos of these, you know, circulating from back in the day. So, meaning wingless Delta-shaped, meaning they kind of look like how a stealth bomber looks a little bit, just in a Delta shape. The first UFO sighting was by a man named Kenneth Arnold, and this happened in the aforementioned Pacific Northwest. He himself was a pilot and had a little propeller jet that he flew around on the weekends for leisure. Now, one day, while out on the open skies, old Kenny Boy looked out in his window and saw an odd arrangement of aircraft flying in formation, When he landed, he spoke out on it and was asked to draw what he saw. And wouldn't you know it, these flying saucers were delta-shaped. Now, flying saucer, that term, never referred to the shape of the aircraft, as many believe now. You know, the common trope for a UFO is a circular craft, but that was not the case of what Kenneth saw. Flying saucer actually referred to the way it skipped across the sky. Like if you're to skip a flat rock on the lake, that's more what he was getting at. So that's something that you have to keep in mind if you see more of this UFO crap coming out. Like, that's not what they were originally. How do we get to this point? How do we get there? Who was pushing this narrative? But anyway, then you have Project Blue Book, not Project Blue Beam, but could be related. I don't know, possibly. Now, Blue Book was run by the FBI with the University of Colorado. They were commissioned to help with the research. And Blue Book was an operation to investigate UFO sightings, and it can help us really glean a lot. And I will link a report to the description, or in the description, because it still lives publicly in the National Archives online. That's pretty cool. But you can read about how Senator Barry Goldwater wanted to know about what was going on because there was allegedly a saucer that crashed at an Air Force base in Ohio, and he was told to go away because it was on a need-to-know basis, and he didn't need to know. He wasn't on the list. Jimmy Carter even himself said that if elected, he would tell the public UFO secrets that the government had, but ultimately he didn't for some reason. But anyway, a bit of this Blue Book report that I found really fascinating. I'm going to start if the reading is a little rough because I just took a screenshot, and it's got that old typewriter sort of, I don't know, courier? I don't know what we call it these days. I don't care. I'm supposed to be a designer, whatever. And it's all like really scrunched together. So I'm going to try to read it. I'm going to try to be audible and intelligible, but if I'm not, then just go read the thing for yourself, I guess. So as it says, with this brief background of information about me and about government participation, the challenge I have mentioned would be to have you make inquiries at the highest level of officialdom about what the government really knows, whether or not there are alien bodies located anywhere, what happened to the crashed flying saucers, where are the photos taken by the Air Force personnel through onboard gun cameras, and similar questioning. I am positive you would be able to find that even you would be getting a general runaround and could not receive satisfactory answers to the above. I think you would find you are not receiving all the information you should be receiving, which should be very evident to you after making several inquiries. You may tend to drop the matter, thinking you are receiving answers to your questions. But this will not be the case, I assure you. Now, this was written to Senator Barry Goldwater. Goldwater wrote back to Mr. William Sessions, who wrote that first bit. Mr. Sessions, I will not take more of your time in this matter, but if you are interested, I would appreciate you looking into the matter. You may wish to appoint one of your office personnel to start making inquiry about UFOs in general and see which agencies to which you would be directed. Keep in mind, however, that some present office personnel in other agencies may not know what you would be inquiring about and will tell you that the Air Force Project Blue Book closed its doors in 1969 and that the Air Force no longer investigates UFO sighting reports. This I already know. The important key is to go beyond the Air Force and into other agencies, such as the Office of Defense, CIA, etc. President Bush, when asked about UFOs, told the person asking, "You do not know the half of it." As you know, President Bush was formerly with the CIA. His comments are on tape, by the way. That's pretty fascinating, wouldn't you say? That's pretty interesting. Now, this letter ends by Goldwater wishing Mr. Sessions a nice trip with his dad. Aw. And then his signature is redacted for some reason. Also funny how Sessions replies saying basically the FBI doesn't investigate UFOs. That's never been our job, so quit asking. All in an FBI document on UFO research. But anyway, the document numbers the total amount of sightings as well as the amount of truly unidentified flying objects, beginning in, you guessed it, 1947. And of course, as the document mentioned before, ending in 1969. The most amount of sightings happened in 1952 with 1,501 and 303 total unidentified crafts. Wow, this kombucha is pretty good. They sell it at Aldi too. Go get some. Anyway, in total, during that time period, there were 12,618 sightings and 701 total unidentified objects. Now, what does this really mean? Well, when I tell you nothing, I really mean nothing. As far as extraterrestrials go, I should say. Now, at this time, remember, planes were invented in 1903, meaning at the time of the start of this investigation, we hadn't even had them for 50 years at that point. Now, a lot of technological progression can happen and did happen in 50 years, but not everybody was attuned to such technology over the continental United States. You know, your grandma seeing a drone for the first time today would likely have a very similar reaction to seeing a more advanced, to like someone in Oklahoma or like farther out west, like say Wyoming, seeing a more advanced airplane. Like it's just how it is. They're not in the know of some of these things. Apparently Boeing isn't either. But anyway, oh great, now I'm gonna get taken out for that. It's a joke, Boeing. It's a joke. I'm not a whistleblower. Okay? Please don't. Yeah, whatever, they're not listening. Now, during this time, you also have to remember that the United States was clearly not the only country testing out new aircraft. Foreign craft flying in our airspace illegally or as an ally for secret testing purposes is very possible too. Because remember, I mean, it still is, but especially during that time, that area, that sort of Western Great Plains area, wasn't super heavily populated. So if you needed to test out some top secret aircraft technology, you could. You had the space to do it. Why not? If you're an ally of the United States, like say the British government or the French government, why not ask to see if you can ship a plane over there and test it? Why not? Oh my gosh. The more I drink this, the more I really like this kombucha. I'm doing this so I don't have to pause again and, you know, have coughing fits. I probably should at least try to crack open this door. This is the first time I'm going to do this, so if the sound quality worsens, that's why, but I just need a little bit of airflow in here so I don't get all stuffy. But seriously, as we continue, this leads to other conversations about technology held by our government that is not yet ready to be revealed to the public. I personally have it on fairly good authority, I would say, from a former land surveyor and Blue Lodge Freemason, that in the 1960s, the United States government had access to touchscreen technology. Now, albeit it was archaic, but it was still more advanced than anything we had seen before, and anything that was just a part of the general public. Oh, excuse me. Jeez. Now, that could all be hearsay, I should point out. That is very possible that it is all hearsay. I don't know for sure. I don't think I'll ever know for sure. But given what we know about Operation Paperclip and what went on there, I'm more inclined to believe it than not. Now you might ask, continuing your questioning of me on this topic and why I hold my positions, you might also ask, but what about abduction stories? What do you have to say about that? Also, did you start a new skincare routine? Your face is glowing. And I would reply again, why, yes, I did. Thank you for noticing. I use my red light therapy panel every night and then apply a paste made of honey, baking soda, and apple cider vinegar to any affected areas on my face. Let that sit overnight, wash it off in the morning with my beef tallow soap, then spray coconut water and lemon juice on my face to brighten up the skin a little bit and clean it off even more, and then apply my beef tallow moisturizer that I get from Van Man. Go check him out. He had to change his website recently because someone hacked him. But if you look up like Man with the Van on Instagram, you'd find him. That's where I get my beef tallow moisturizer from. Pretty good stuff, I have to say. Also, on the topic of abduction, I just rambled and said all that nonsense for no reason. Oh my gosh. There are answers for this UFO contactee literature. I will say that. Now, I hope you're caught up on the last episode, because MK Ultra is coming right back up again. I know I've brought it up a few times already, but if you're not caught up on the government's mind control experimentation in the 1940s and 1960s, roughly the same time span that all this stuff takes place, I'll wait. I'll wait a little bit. I'll just pause right here. Go pause this episode. Go pull up that one, episode 7, and just listen to that. Get caught up, and then we'll be good to go. Okay. Alrighty, folks, welcome back. You might have picked up on, given what I just discussed here, a little bit of withheld information, and you would be exactly right. A technique also used in MK Ultra experimentation was something called a screen memory. That's when, while in a state of hypnosis, the hypnotizer creates a fake memory for the hypnotized person to remember instead of what actually happened. Now, as always, remember, people who underwent said procedures often did so against their will and were traumatized so badly that they either had to be institutionalized or completely disassociated. In one case, if they were institutionalized, they were tested on even further. How cool! Anyway, that's part of it. The next part gets theological and supernatural, at least depending on how you look at it. Oftentimes when Stockholm syndrome, that sets in, an individual feels a little special, chosen by their captors, like they're there for a good reason. They have a message to deliver to the rest of the world that they were captured to give. Well, what are some of the messages found in contactee instances? They're often very anti-Christian in origin. Ideas like, Christ was nothing special, or he was one of us, or we're choosing you like we chose him. The last one has interesting eschatological implications, but that is for a different time. We can also look at the story of Billy Meyer, which, if you remember from my second episode, has a very similar story to Aleister Crowley. Meyer gained popularity for his UFO photography, taking photos that almost look too good to be true, one of which made the cover of the National Enquirer, if I'm not mistaken. Just really, really fantastic photos of UFOs, apparently. And I'm convinced that is really where we got the idea of UFOs being like round-looking things. But Meyer had a story of being contacted by a female alien who, in his recanting of the story, was, of course, very attractive, but went by the name Semyaza, which is a name awfully close to the demon in the Book of Enoch, Semyaza. Semyaza, I should say. There's a different, slightly different pronunciation based on emphasis of different syllables. But is that a coincidence? Is it all made up? I don't know, but it's interesting to think about. Enoch identifies this figure with being one of the key actors in the whole Genesis 6 incident. But also, let's take a look at probing. The awful ritual abuse like the CIA did, but with the message that a hybrid being is being created with unwilling assistance of said human. What does that sound a lot like? Well, if you remember my episode on giants, it sounds a lot like the story of the Watchers descending upon Mount Hermon, who intermingled with human women to create the Nephilim, the giants. Isn't that awfully interesting? Now, none of these contacts have been involved with anything disparaging to any other faith. Only Christianity for some reason. And that's even backed up by non-Christian ufologists such as Jacques Vallée, a famous UFO researcher. He himself said that there was something spiritually sinister about the messaging in these contacts, and I think there's a reason for it. But I would also be remiss if I didn't mention a little itty-bitty tiny detail here. Let me take a sip of my kombucha and I will get to it. I'm getting like a scratchy feeling in my throat because I've been talking for too long in this closet with no airflow. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, MIT. Yes, that MIT held a conference that investigated contactee literature, and groups of scientists studied links between abduction narratives and satanic ritual abuse. I am not joking. That really happened. That's actually where the anti-Christian sentiment came from with a lot of these things, is that they're all tied to satanic ritual abuse. Meaning, of course, that the CIA and MK Ultra experimentation was conducting satanic ritual abuse. So to wrap that up a bit, the ties between abduction narratives and satanic ritual abuse comes from probing, talks of hybrid creatures, that this event will put you more in tune with the universe to deliver a message. And it was some of it was conducted by the CIA as a part of mind control experiments. Now, there are two routes that you could go down here. One is that this is absolutely a spiritual occurrence by a higher order to supernatural beings with wicked intentions, or you could say that there's a human element to this. Or I guess you could even, combine them together so that the human origins are plans being carried out by said, principalities, powers, cosmic forces present of the present darkness, classic Ephesians 6:12, Deuteronomy 32 type stuff, but that's just me. Personally, all these options here are really on the table for me. And I'm going to expand a bit more on the human side of this because I feel like the other side is fairly self-explanatory. But a 1961 Brookings report was a survey conducted on the impact of a genuine alien disclosure on the human population. What would it do? Would it change our worldviews? Should it? Would society collapse into a nihilistic void of chaos and transgression more so than it already has if it were true? Well, it ultimately concluded that there wouldn't be such a change. Questions have arisen about the nuance allowed for it in certain questions and the grasp that the participants would have had on it. But then in 2009, another survey with very similar goals, but a more direct line of questioning, concluded the following. The survey has sought to provide data relevant to confirming or disconfirming the following hypothesis. Upon confirmation of contact between Earth and an extraterrestrial civilization of intelligent beings, the long-established religious traditions of Earth would confront a crisis of belief and perhaps even collapse. Responses from persons self-identifying with one of 7 major religious traditions report that they do not fear an impending collapse in their own religious belief system, taking into account a minority who for theological or scientific reasons affirm the rare Earth position. Relatively little fragility in existing religious beliefs seems evident. So basically the same thing, A genuine alien disclosure wouldn't generally shake the faith of a majority of fundamentalist Christians. In fact, the Brookings report itself even found that they think many would try to evangelize said aliens with, which is both really funny and really sweet. But what does this have to do with the price of bananas? How does this affect literally anything? You just said that it wouldn't shake up anything. Well, what if you could convince the world that Christ was an extraterrestrial, much like the messaging of said contactee literature? That brings us back to the nuanced world of Project Bluebeam. Now, I've covered this topic already, but it ties in nicely to this concept of curbing Christianity, and I would say really Judaism too, because their foundation is built on God over government. I also want to note that Werner von Braun's assistant, Carol Rosen, said a faked alien invasion has been around, or a plan for it has been around since the 1970s in order to send more money to the military, kind of like the War on Terror. Isn't that fun? Like the whole Federal Reserve being created so, they could harvest more money for war, and like the three main people who were against the creation of the Fed were on the Titanic when it sank. Oh, surely that stuff isn't fishy, right? Anyway, a faked imminent alien invasion that also somehow doubles as the return of Christ would be massive for such a plot, which is both evil and disgusting. Now, I really don't know what to think in terms of the totality of truth around Project Bluebeam. It would have maybe some truth, but partially false, fully true, fully false, whatever. Maybe ideology is pushing for anti-borders, anti-nationalism, and anti-religion are all just a coincidence, that they're cropping up at the same time as this alien narrative is being pushed. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just some idiot in his closet in Los Angeles. I don't know. But ultimately, an alien disclosure shouldn't change the Christian worldview at all, really, at least how I see it. And if we're talking, if there is, genuine alien life, not necessarily if, aliens are like dark spiritual entities masquerading as extraterrestrials. That seems to be kind of like a common belief cropping up in Christianity. And I don't think that's necessarily absolutely true, but as I just talked about with the CIA literally committing satanic ritual abuse, that's not surprising. I would not be surprised at all. But anyway, Christ would not have to die on other planets, for example. It's always a big counter argument against, the affirmation of a coexistence between God and alien. First off, God doesn't have to tell us everything he does. But second, just because aliens aren't mentioned in scripture doesn't mean that they're absolutely not real. Sharks aren't also mentioned by name in the Bible, but we know those are true. That's another big thing that people are like, oh, the Bible doesn't mention it. So I don't think it's, a lot of things that aren't mentioned in there. It's not supposed to be like a total encyclopedia of everything. It's not a science textbook. But anyway, Christ wouldn't have to die for them because they're not made in the image of God. That's really the big thing. However you really interpret the image of God is up to you. But ultimately, personally, I believe it is more like a we are to live as his imagers, his proxy on earth, carrying out his will. And, that was always the intention, and, the sin problem happened, and we're so capable of that, but whatever. What can we take away from this? I don't need to get too theological and too deep into theological weeds here. I've done that enough on this podcast. Really, though, what can we take away from all of this? Well, one, if it was revealed that there was real alien life and they visited us, no worldview would have to change, unless you were staunchly anti-alien. 2, the government really wants you to think that aliens are at work, so they can use them as a cover for secret technological advancement, as well as crimes against humanity committed in the past. 3. This quote from Wernher von Braun, the former Nazi scientist and number 2 at NASA, shortly before his death. The last card they hold is the alien card, the extraterrestrial card, and none of them are hostile. It's just a lie. That's pretty fascinating. So that dude, it sounds like he's convinced that there is extraterrestrial life out there, and the government is just lying about the nature of it. Maybe all the stuff that I said is a cover up, in a sense that they do have like genuine alien extraterrestrial recovered items, but it's all in a sense to make it look like it was malicious in nature. Who knows? I don't know. Overall, topic of aliens is just a very, very broad one that takes a lot of philosophical thought to get to certain points on what you would do if they were real. Now, mine is secure in that I don't think I have to change mine at all, no matter what the case is. But some people do. And if you're one of those people, I don't know, maybe try some thought experiments. Maybe think about how, let's say, if you necessarily aren't a Christian, or if you aren't a believer in anything, you're just agnostic or atheist in general, maybe consider why so many of these contactee moments have had such anti-Christian messaging. What's the point of that? Is it because Christianity is inherently true and they hate truth and they know that it's just such a strong uniting factor that brings people across every sort of, race and creed and whatever sort of background together? Because that's what they truly fear? Maybe, I don't know. But if you enjoyed this episode of the Negative Space Podcast, please leave a like, tell me something funny in the comments. Go follow my Instagram at negativespace.pod to be one of the top 1% most attractive people in the world, and add 5% to your gym gains, guaranteed, or your money back. All the money that you put towards this podcast will be given back to you if you don't see a 5% increase in your gym gains. Guaranteed. That's just science. I'm sorry. Don't argue with it. You're not allowed to argue with that. It's science. It's set in stone. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. I will see you next time. I love you. Goodbye.